Have you ever wondered why some couples can sit in the same room for hours without saying a single word that matters? They talk about dinner plans, work schedules, bills that need paying, but never about what really sits between them. The distance, the weight, the thing neither of them wants to name. Saint Teresa of Avila saw this. Not in couples exactly, because she lived behind convent walls in 1500s Spain. But she saw something deeper. She saw how people could share the same space, the same prayers, the same daily routine, and still become strangers to each other. She called it the death of friendship, and she understood that when friendship dies, everything dies with it. Teresa was born in 1515 in the Spanish town of Avila. Her father was a wealthy merchant, her mother died when Teresa was 14, and by age 20 she'd entered the Carmelite monastery of the Incarnation. She spent the next 40 years reforming the entire Carmelite order, founding 17 convents, writing books that would make her a doctor of the church, and becoming one of the most psychologically acute spiritual teachers in Christian history. But what matters for this story is what she saw about relationships, what she wrote about in 1565 in her autobiography, and again in 1577 when she completed the interior castle at age 62. She described 7 levels of intimacy, 7 dwelling places. She called them mansions. And she said most people never make it past the 3rd. The first mansion is meeting someone. The second is deciding they matter. The third is where you start building a life together. But then something happens. Right there at the edge of the 4th mansion, most people stop. They settle into routine. They think they have arrived because they share a home, a bed, meals together. They think proximity equals intimacy. It does not. Teresa saw couples and friends and even nuns who lived in the same convent become distant without ever physically leaving. They stopped sharing what mattered. They stopped revealing themselves. They wrapped their real thoughts, their fears, their desires in silence and called it peace. She wrote about it in The Way of Perfection, a book she finished in 1566 for her nuns at St. Joseph's Convent. She said that some friendships are only surface level. They talk about shallow things. They avoid anything that requires vulnerability. And then they wonder why they feel alone, even when someone is lying right next to them. If you value deeply researched content like this, subscribe. It is the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you are hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Teresa's own writings, preserved in the collected works of Saint Teresa of Avila, translated by Kieran Kavanagh and Otilio Rodriguez, and published by ICS Publications in 1985, along with biographical research from Jody. Billinkoff's The Avila of Saint Teresa, published by Cornell University Press in 1989, which examines the social and religious context of 16th century Spain. Now back to the information. In 1562, Teresa founded her first Reformed convent. She limited it to 13 nuns, not because of budget or space, because she understood group dynamics, more than 13 in cliques form, subgroups, factions. People pair off, and the deep sharing stops. They retreat into comfortable alliances that never challenge them. She wanted every nun to be a true friend to every other nun. She wanted them to help each other grow, not just coexist, not just be polite, actually know each other, see each other, call each other deeper. She wrote in The Way of Perfection, Chapter 4, that great friendships in religious houses are seldom directed toward helping one another love more deeply. Instead, they become exclusive, protective, defensive. The very thing meant to bring people together ends up dividing them. Translate that to modern relationships, and you see it everywhere. Couples who present as fine to the world, but have not had a real conversation in months. They talk logistics, schedules, what needs to be done, but not what they feel, not what scares them, not what they dream about in the middle of the night when sleep will not come. Teresa called this the danger of the 3rd mansion. You have built something together. You have established patterns, routines, a shared life, but you have stopped moving inward. You have stopped revealing the hidden rooms of your heart. You stay in the public spaces, the parlor, the sitting room. You never invite the other person into your bedroom. Not the physical bedroom, the metaphorical one, the place where you are most vulnerable, most exposed, most yourself. Teresa understood that intimacy requires risk. Friendship requires honesty. Deep connection requires revealing things you would rather hide. She wrote that mental prayer, her term for authentic communion with another, is nothing else than an intimate sharing between friends. It means taking time frequently to be alone with the one who we know loves us. That last part matters. The one who we know loves us. Because vulnerability without safety is just exposure. Teresa said, you cannot open yourself to someone you do not trust. And trust is built slowly, over years, through consistency, through showing up, through not using what someone tells you as a weapon later when you're angry. She saw this play out in the monastery. Nuns who shared deep things in moments of openness, only to have those confessions thrown back at them during conflicts. It broke trust, it closed doors, It made people retreat behind walls they would never lower again. In 1582, Teresa was traveling to make her last foundation. She was 67 years old, exhausted, sick. A river flooded. She and her companions were caught in the torrent. She looked up at God and said, "Lord, amid so many ills, this comes on top of all the rest." A voice answered her, "Teresa, that is how I treat my friends." She shot back without hesitation, "Oh my God, that is why you have so few of them." That exchange tells you everything about her. She was not pious and meek. She was sharp, witty, brutally honest. And she demanded the same honesty from others. She did not want surface pleasantries. She did not want people hiding behind religious language or fake serenity. She wanted the truth, even when the truth was ugly, especially when the truth was ugly. She wrote that many relationships fail because people are afraid to say the hard things. They avoid conflict. They smooth over tension. They pretend everything is fine when it is not fine. And then years pass, and they wake up next to a stranger. This is the fourth mansion problem, the place where most people stop. Teresa said the fourth mansion is where God begins to touch the soul in ways that cannot be manufactured. You cannot force this level of intimacy. You cannot fake it. It requires surrender. It requires letting someone see you without your armor. And that terrifies people. So they stay in the third mansion. They stay safe. They stay shallow. They stay alone. In the interior castle, Teresa described the difference between the third and fourth mansion like this. In the third mansion, you are still in control. You pray when you feel like it. You open up when it is convenient. You share what is easy to share. In the fourth mansion, God starts calling you deeper, and you have no control over it. It happens when you're not ready. It strips away your defenses. It exposes you. For couples, this looks like one person trying to have a real conversation and the other person shutting down. Or one person asking what is wrong and the other saying nothing when everything is wrong. Or one person reaching out and the other retreating because being truly known feels more dangerous than being alone. Teresa said this is where relationships either deepen or die. Either you move forward into vulnerability or you calcify in the third mansion. You become roommates, business partners, co-parents, but not friends, not lovers, not people who actually know each other. She wrote in chapter 7 of The Life that she spent 20 years stuck at this exact place. She entered the monastery at 20. For the next 2 decades, she lived in what she called mediocrity. She prayed, but not deeply. She followed the rules, but without real commitment. She kept one foot in the world and one foot in the monastery. She wanted God, but she also wanted her comforts, her friendships, her attachments. And then at age 40, something broke. She saw a statue of the wounded Christ and everything changed. She stopped holding back. She stopped protecting herself. She stopped playing it safe. She said yes to going deeper, even though it terrified her. That is the fourth mansion. That is the turning point. That is where relationships either transform or end. Most end. Not through breakup necessarily. Not through divorce always, but through slow death. Through years of coexistence without connection. Through talking without saying anything. Through being together while remaining fundamentally alone. Teresa said the way through requires 3 things. Love of neighbor, detachment from earthly things, and humility. Love of neighbor does not mean being nice. It means willing the good of the other even when it costs you. It means telling the truth even when the truth will start a fight. It means staying present even when you want to leave. It means choosing the relationship over your comfort. Detachment from earthly things means not clinging to your version of how things should be. Not demanding the other person change, not trying to control outcomes. Teresa said, we cannot merit anything. We cannot force intimacy. We can only create space for it and then wait. And humility, true humility. Teresa said, humility is true knowledge of ourselves, seeing ourselves as we actually are. Not better, not worse, just real. She said, we are sinners in need of grace. We are broken people trying to love other broken people. And if we cannot admit our own brokenness, we will never be able to handle someone else's. She wrote in The Way of Perfection that the test of whether you are growing in a relationship is whether you are growing in love. Not the feeling of love, the action of love. Are you more patient than you were a year ago? Are you more generous? Are you more willing to listen? Are you more able to forgive? If not, you are not moving forward. You are stuck. Teresa saw this in the monastery constantly. Nuns who had lived together for decades but never really knew each other. They knew habits, preferences, quirks, but not hopes, not fears, not the secret parts of the soul that only reveal themselves in silence and safety. She said this happens because people mistake familiarity for intimacy. They think that because they have been together a long time, they must be close. But time does not create depth. Only honesty creates depth. Only vulnerability creates depth. Only the willingness to be seen creates depth. In 1572, on November 18th, Teresa experienced what she called spiritual betrothal. In 1575, she entered spiritual marriage. The difference matters. Betrothal is promise. Marriage is union. Betrothal is learning to love. Marriage is becoming one. She described it using the metaphor every couple should understand. Betrothal is like two separate candles burning side by side. You can distinguish one from the other. You can separate them. But marriage is like when rain falls into a river. You cannot divide the water. You cannot tell which drop came from the sky and which was already in the river. They have become one thing. That is the seventh mansion. That is the goal, not losing yourself. But finding yourself so completely that you can give yourself away without fear. Not merging into one person, but becoming two people so deeply known to each other that there is no hidden space left between you. Teresa said most people never reach this. Not because it is impossible, but because it requires dying to everything you use to protect yourself. It requires killing the old self, the defended self, the self that thinks being known will destroy you. She used the image of a silkworm becoming a butterfly. The silkworm must seal itself in a cocoon and essentially dissolve. Everything it was must die, and only then does something new emerge, something that can fly. That is what the fourth mansion requires. Choosing to die to your need to control the outcome, die to your need to be right, die to your need to protect your image, die to your need to hide the parts of yourself you think are unlovable. Teresa was not speaking metaphorically. She meant it literally. She said, you must be prepared to die rather than commit a grave sin. And in relationships, the grave sin is dishonesty. It is hiding. It is pretending. It is living with someone and never letting them see you. Because when you hide from another person, you teach them they cannot be known either. You create a contract of mutual concealment. And that contract kills intimacy. In The Interior Castle, Teresa wrote that the soul is a castle made of diamond or very clear crystal. Inside are 7 dwelling places. At the center is God. But between the outer wall and the center are 6 other rooms. 6 levels of increasing intimacy, 6 degrees of stripping away pretense. She said the tragedy is that most souls never leave the first 3 rooms. They build their lives there, they get comfortable, they think they have arrived. Meanwhile, the center remains empty. The place of true union remains unexplored. They spend their whole lives in the outer chambers and never discover what they were made for. Translate that to relationships, and you see couples who know each other's schedules but not each other's souls, who can predict each other's reactions but not understand each other's pain, who share a bed but not their dreams, who talk constantly but never say anything real. Teresa said in chapter 4 of the life that prayer, real prayer, cannot be accompanied by self-indulgence. Prayer is a going out of oneself toward another. Self-indulgence is concentration on self. And she said, you cannot do both. You have to choose. Either you protect yourself or you open yourself. Either you stay safe or you love deeply. There is no middle ground. She wrote that she wasted 20 years trying to find a middle ground, trying to love God while also protecting herself from God, trying to be intimate while also maintaining control. And it did not work. It could not work. Because intimacy requires surrender, and surrender means giving up control. For couples, this means you cannot control how your partner responds when you reveal something hard. You cannot control whether they will use it against you. You cannot control whether they will stay or leave. All you can control is whether you tell the truth. And most people would rather live with distance than risk that kind of exposure. Teresa understood this fear. She wrote about it. She said that when God began calling her deeper in the fourth mansion, her first response was terror, because she knew what deeper meant. It meant no more hiding, no more pretending, no more presenting a version of herself that was palatable and safe. She wrote in chapter 11 of the life that God does not force anyone into the deeper mansions. You have to consent. You have to say yes. And many people, when they reach that threshold, turn back. They return to the third mansion. They settle for surface friendship. They choose safety over intimacy. And she said she understands why. Because what lies ahead in the 5th, 6th, and 7th mansions is painful. It is a stripping away, a purification, a death of the false self. She said you will lose everything you thought protected you, your defenses, your masks, your strategies for keeping people at a safe distance. But what you gain is worth it. What you gain is union, true union, the kind where you know and are known, where you love and are loved, where you can be completely yourself and discover that being yourself is enough. Teresa died October 4th, 1582 in Alba de Tormes. She was 67 years old. She had founded 17 convents, written multiple books, reformed an entire religious order, been investigated by the Inquisition, survived floods, sickness, political intrigue, and decades of resistance from church authorities. But her legacy is not the institutions she built. It is the map she left. The interior castle, 7 mansions, 7 levels of intimacy, 7 stages from meeting someone to becoming one with them, and the warning she gives at every level. Do not stop here. Do not mistake this for the destination. There is more. There is always more. But you have to keep saying yes. You have to keep moving inward. You have to keep letting yourself be seen. In the 6th mansion, Teresa described what she called spiritual betrothal. This is where the soul is wounded with love and strives for more opportunities to be alone with the beloved. This is where the ache for union becomes so strong that everything else fades. For couples, this is the stage where you realize that knowing this person has become more important than protecting yourself, where you would rather be hurt by their truth than comforted by their lies, where you finally understand that real love is not about feeling good, it is about being known. Teresa said the sixth mansion is also the most dangerous, because this is where the enemy attacks hardest. This is where doubts flood in. This is where you question everything. Is this real? Am I deluding myself? Should I retreat to safety? She said many souls turn back here. They get scared. The intensity is too much. The vulnerability is too raw. They convince themselves it was all a mistake. They rebuild their walls. They return to the third mansion and call it wisdom. But it is not wisdom. It is fear. Teresa said, if you can push through the sixth mansion, if you can endure the doubts and the stripping and the exposure, you reach the seventh, the spiritual marriage, the place of permanent union, the place where separation is no longer possible because you have become one. She described it in chapter 2 of the seventh mansion. She said in spiritual betrothal, the souls can still separate. They can pull back. But in spiritual marriage, the union is permanent. It is like rain falling into a river. It is like two streams of light entering a room through different windows and becoming one brightness. For couples, this means you have revealed everything. You know each other completely. Not just the good parts, not just the version you present to the world. Everything, the anger, the shame, the secret fears, the hidden desires, the past you try to bury, the present you cannot control, the future you dread. And you choose to stay, not because it is easy, not because it feels good, but because this person has become part of you. Their pain is your pain. Their joy is your joy. You are no longer two people trying to love each other. You are one thing, one flesh, one soul. Teresa said this is rare, very rare. Most religious people never reach it. Most married people never reach it. Not because it is impossible, but because the cost is too high. The death required is too complete. The vulnerability demanded is too extreme. But for those who pay the price, she said, the reward is beyond description. She wrote that in the seventh mansion, the soul experiences an unshakable peace, a clarity, a conviction that cannot be taken away. Not because circumstances are perfect, but because the union is permanent. She said nothing external can disturb this peace. You can be in the middle of a storm and remain calm. You can face loss and betrayal and suffering and still have this deep certainty that you are not alone. You are known, you are loved, you are held. This is what happens when couples stop avoiding the deep conversations, when they stop hiding from each other, when they push through the fear of the fourth mansion and keep going. They discover something most people never find. They discover that being fully known is not the death of love. It is the birth of love. Teresa wrote in her letters that the soul who reaches spiritual marriage is like someone who has legal title to a magnificent property but cannot take possession yet. They know it is theirs. They can see it, but they do not fully enjoy it until death. For couples, the parallel is clear. You can taste this kind of union. You can have moments of it. Times when you look at your partner and realize you know them completely and they know you. Times when you communicate without words. Times when their presence alone brings peace. But you do not live there constantly. Not yet. You still have to navigate daily life, still have to pay bills and make dinner and deal with stress, still have moments of misunderstanding and frustration and distance. Teresa said that is normal. Even the seventh mansion does not eliminate struggle. What it eliminates is existential loneliness, the terror of being fundamentally unknown, the fear that if anyone really saw you, they would leave. She wrote that once you reach spiritual marriage, that fear disappears, not because the other person is perfect, but because the union is complete. You have been seen, all of you, and you were not rejected. You were embraced. That is the goal. That is what relationships are meant to become. Not perfect, not easy, but deeply, irrevocably, permanently known. And it begins with one decision. The decision to tell the truth, to have the hard conversation, to stop hiding, to move from the third mansion toward the fourth, to risk being seen. Most people never make that decision. They stay safe. They stay shallow. They stay strangers to the person they sleep next to every night. And they wonder why they feel alone. Teresa would say they feel alone because they are alone, not physically, spiritually. They have not let anyone in. They have not moved past the outer rooms. They have settled for coexistence when union was possible. She understood exactly why this happens. In her writings, she described the specific ways people avoid intimacy without realizing it. They fill their time with busyness. They create drama about small things to avoid talking about big things. They focus on external problems, so they do not have to look at internal ones. She saw this in the monastery. Nuns who complained endlessly about small inconveniences, the food, the schedule, the weather, the way another sister prayed. Teresa said these complaints were smokescreens, distractions from the real issue, which was that they did not want to face themselves. They did not want to look at their own pride, their own fear, their own need for control. In relationships, this looks like couples who fight about dishes but never talk about intimacy, who argue about money but never discuss values, who disagree about parenting but never reveal their own childhood wounds. The surface issue is never the real issue, but addressing the real issue requires going deeper than most people are willing to go. Teresa wrote in Chapter 7 of The Way of Perfection about what she called particular friendships. She said these are relationships that look close from the outside, but are actually barriers to real intimacy. They are exclusive, possessive. They give the illusion of connection while preventing actual vulnerability. She said, you know a relationship has become a particular friendship when it stops challenging you, when it stops calling you to growth, when it becomes about comfort rather than transformation, when you choose it because it is easy, not because it is good. Modern couples fall into this constantly. They become each other's enablers. They protect each other's illusions. They agree not to push too hard or ask too much or expect too much. They settle into a comfortable mediocrity and call it compatibility. But Teresa said compatibility is not the goal. Union is the goal. And union requires friction. It requires being pushed. It requires having your comfortable illusions shattered. It requires seeing yourself clearly, and that sight is almost always painful. She wrote that when she finally allowed herself to be challenged in the fourth mansion, it was excruciating. She saw her own selfishness, her own vanity, her own manipulation, her own ways of keeping God and people at a safe distance while pretending to be close. And she said that seeing yourself that clearly makes you want to run, makes you want to go back to the third mansion where you could maintain your self-image, where you could think of yourself as basically good, where you did not have to face the darkness inside you. But you cannot reach the seventh mansion without going through that darkness. You cannot achieve union without facing disunion. You cannot become one with another person until you become one with yourself. And becoming one with yourself means integrating the parts you have been running from, the anger you pretend you do not feel, the needs you pretend you do not have, the wounds you pretend have healed. Teresa said this integration happens in the fifth mansion. This is the cocoon stage, the silkworm stage, where everything you thought you were dissolves, where your identity breaks down, where you can no longer maintain the version of yourself you have been presenting. For couples, this is crisis. This is when one person starts questioning everything, when they say, I do not know who I am anymore, when they pull away not because they want distance, but because they need space to figure out what is real and what was performance. Teresa said this stage terrifies most people. They think it means the relationship is ending. They think it means something is wrong. But she said the opposite is true. This stage means something is finally becoming right. This stage means the false self is dying so the true self can emerge. The question is whether both people can hold space for that dying. Whether the partner who is not currently in crisis can be patient, can resist the urge to fix it, can trust that the cocoon is not a tomb but a womb, that what looks like an ending is actually a beginning. Most cannot. Most panic. Most demand their partner go back to how they were. Most make the crisis about themselves. Most turn the fifth mansion into a battlefield instead of a birthing room. Teresa said she was lucky. She had spiritual directors who understood the process, who told her to trust it, who assured her the dissolution was necessary, who promised that, on the other side, was something better than what she had before. But not everyone has that. Not every couple has people around them who understand that growth looks like falling apart, that transformation looks like crisis, that the death of the false self is the birth of the true self. So they abort the process, they pull back to the third mansion. They reconstruct the old patterns. They go back to performing. And they tell themselves they saved the relationship. But really, they just delayed the inevitable, because the true self will not stay buried forever. It will keep pushing, keep demanding, keep insisting on being known. And if it cannot be known in the current relationship, it will either destroy the relationship or destroy the person. Those are the only options. You either grow together or you grow apart. You either both choose the fifth mansion or you both retreat to the third. There is no middle ground. The way forward is simple. Not easy, but simple. You start talking about what matters, not what is comfortable. What matters? You stop waiting for the perfect moment. You stop protecting your image. You stop pretending everything is fine when it is not. You say, I am scared. You say, I feel distant from you. You say, I do not know how to fix this, but I want to. You say, I need you to see me, really see me. Not the version I present, but the person I actually am. And then you wait. You do not control their response. You do not demand they reciprocate immediately. You just offer yourself. Honestly, fully, without defense. Teresa said that active offering is prayer, real prayer, the kind that changes everything, because it breaks the pattern of hiding. It interrupts the cycle of distance. It creates space for something new. Sometimes the other person meets you there. Sometimes they reach back. Sometimes they say, I see you. I have always seen you. I was just waiting for you to stop pretending. And sometimes they do not. Sometimes they retreat. Sometimes the offering is rejected. Sometimes the relationship ends, not because you told the truth, but because the truth revealed you were never really together to begin with. Teresa said, that is painful, devastating even. But it is better than spending your life with someone who never knew you. Better than dying having never been seen. Better than reaching the end and realizing you played it safe and missed everything that mattered. She wrote in one of her last letters in 1582 that suffering is part of love, real love, the kind that costs something. She said, if you want easy love, stay in the third mansion, stay with surface connection, stay with people who do not challenge you. But if you want the seventh mansion, if you want union, you have to be willing to suffer. You have to be willing to die to yourself. You have to be willing to be wrong, to be hurt, to be misunderstood, to be exposed. And then, if you survive that death, you discover what Teresa discovered, that on the other side of that dying is life, real life, the kind where you are not performing, not hiding, not pretending, just living, just loving, just being known. That is what Saint Teresa saw. That is what she mapped. That is what she left for anyone brave enough to follow. 7 mansions, 7 levels, 7 invitations to go deeper, to risk more, to reveal more, to love more. The distance between partners who avoid real talk is the distance between the 3rd and 4th mansion. It is not geography. It is courage. The courage to say what is true even when it is hard. The courage to ask for what you need even when you might not get it. The courage to be seen even when being seen feels like dying. Most people never find that courage. They live their whole lives in the outer rooms. They settle. They adapt. They make peace with distance. They tell themselves this is as good as it gets. Teresa would say they are wrong. She would say there are 4 more mansions waiting, 4 more levels of intimacy, 4 more degrees of union, but you have to choose to enter. You have to say yes. You have to risk the dying. And then, if you are very lucky, if you are very brave, you discover what she discovered. That being fully known does not destroy you. It saves you. That vulnerability is not weakness. It is strength. That the only way to find your life is to lose it. Teresa died in a small convent room in Alba de Tormes. Her last words were, Lord, I am a daughter of the Church. She had spent her life exploring the interior castle, mapping its rooms, naming its dangers, celebrating its joys. And she left that map for us. Not just for nuns, not just for mystics, for anyone in any relationship who has ever felt the weight of distance, who has ever looked at someone they love and realized they do not really know them, who has ever wanted more but did not know how to ask. The map is there. The interior castle. 7 mansions. The first 3 are about building a life together. The last 4 are about building a soul together. Most people stop at 3. Teresa invites you to keep going, to push through fear, to enter the 4th mansion, to risk being known, because on the other side of that risk is everything you've been looking for. Not perfection, not ease, but union, real union. The kind where you know and are known, where you love and are loved, where you can finally stop performing and start living. That is what Teresa saw. That is what she offers. The path from distance to union, from stranger to friend, from surface to depth, from 3rd mansion to 7th, from fear to love. And it begins with one choice. Tell the truth. Have the conversation. Stop hiding. Move inward. Say yes to the dying so you can say yes to the living. That is the teaching. That is the gift. That is what Saint Teresa of Avila saw about the distance growing between partners who avoid real talks. It is not about geography. It is about courage. And the invitation to find that courage is always there, waiting, in the 4th mansion, just past the edge of comfort, just beyond the familiar, just where the real work begins. In 1595, 13 years after her death at age 40, Pope Clement VIII began her beatification process. In 1622, she was canonized by Pope Gregory XV, alongside Ignatius of Loyola, Francis Xavier, Philip Neri, and Isidore the Farmer. In 1970, on September 27th, Pope Paul VI named her the first female doctor of the Church alongside Catherine of Siena. But the honor that would have meant most to Teresa was simpler, that people read her work and chose to go deeper, that couples stopped settling for distance, that partners found the courage to have the hard conversations, that souls entered the 4th mansion and kept going. Because the real legacy of a teacher is not titles. It is lives changed, relationships healed, distance overcome, truth spoken, love deepened. That is what Teresa offers. A map through the interior castle, a guide from outer room to inner chamber, a promise that the journey is worth it, that the dying leads to living, that the vulnerability leads to union, that the risk of being known is worth the reward of being loved. 7 mansions, 7 stages, 7 invitations. The choice is always yours. Stay in the 3rd or move to the 4th. Stay safe or go deeper. Stay strangers or become friends. Stay hidden or be known. Teresa made her choice. She went all the way to the seventh mansion. She paid the price, she did the dying, she found the union, and she left the map for anyone brave enough to follow.